good, man? Story time. Yeah, I just want to tell a quick story. Um, so a few weeks ago, I was talking to a really good friend of mine, and we were talking about, the state of the world and politics, religion, things like that. Stuff that we always pretty much talk about, but, um, you know, what came up is that we were talking about COVID, and he was saying something about how he pretty much thinks that everyone forgot about COVID, right? Or like people don't remember how COVID was. And I just remember saying that, I definitely remember how COVID was because, when I got COVID, um, it was pretty serious, for me. It put me in the hospital, and it was just a crazy time in this country, in the world, and it's something I'll never forget for sure. Because of the way I was impacted. So I think that the point I was making when I was talking to him was, people don't really. It's not that they don't remember COVID, but not everybody was impacted in the same way. There were rumors and stuff going around that it wasn't real, right? And or it was just like the flu. But my experience is that it was a lot more devastating than just catching the flu or the common cold. Um, a lot of people would say it was just like the common cold. So I'm just gonna tell my story about COVID. Probably let this truck drive by real quick here. All right, looks like they're just doing their job there. So, like I was saying, um, so around the time when COVID started, I was actually working as a pharmacy technician. I'm still licensed to this day, but I actually worked for their corporate office here in Arizona, and I was a manager. And what we did is we offered support to the pharmacy for Walgreens. So I was a manager of that department, and needless to say, I was in the healthcare industry, right? So I was working for Walgreens, and I was working in the healthcare industry. So one thing about that is we were considered essential workers. So all throughout the time of COVID, I still had to go into the office. When they did all like the restrictions and stuff like that, I still had to go into the office because I was considered an essential worker. So it was kind of crazy, but basically, COVID started, and me and my wife, we were pretty good about like staying in, not going out, unless we needed to, just like most people in America, or, some people. Obviously, there were the people who were, not going to follow any of the rules or restrictions, which, I guess that's up to you, whatever. This video isn't about whether that is right or wrong. I'm just telling you the story of how COVID like impacted my life. But yeah, we were pretty good about, not mingling, not going out in large crowds, all the stuff that they said to do, use your mask, things like that. So for the first, I want to say, few weeks, everything was, as good as it could be during those times. And I was still going into work because, again, I was considered an essential worker. So I was still going to work, and I remember it was just crazy at that time. I remember you had to get our temperature taken every time we went into work. And I even had to take people's temperature a couple times. You know, it was a big building, so I would like have to stand in the front and then take people's temperature before I let them in. You know, it was just crazy, man. And so you know, a couple weeks went by, and me and my wife, we decided, you know, we wanted to see our friend for her birthday. And like I said, we were doing pretty good as far as like following the restrictions or rules, whatever you want to call them. And we were like, okay, well, it's not going to be a big party, right? It's not going to be like, it's not like we're going to the mall or going to the club or something like that. We're just going to go to our friend's house and just have a little get together. You know, we haven't seen friends or family for a while, so you know, it gets kind of depressing. You're just staying in the house, so that's what we decided to do. And you know, we went out. We had a good time. We just hung out. It was probably let me let them leave real quick. But yeah, it was probably like, I want to say 6 of us at that party. So we were just hanging around, drinking, laughing, you know, celebrating her birthday. And then after that, you know, we all just went back to work. So that was probably like a Saturday. And then the next week, we went back to work, and, you know, people started feeling sick, people from the party. So, you know, we're all checking up on each other. Hey, how do you feel? How do you feel? People are like, I'm feeling sick. Yeah, I wasn't feeling anything really at the time. This was probably on Monday. I want to say like Tuesday, around Tuesday of that week. I was at work, and it was the end of my shift. And I just remember just feeling like drained, you know, like feeling really drained and tired, and also like having some kind of flu symptoms, maybe some light cold symptoms, things like that. I wasn't thinking nothing of it, but you know, COVID was so prevalent and everybody was concerned. And like even the team that I had, because I was a manager, so I had a team of like 14 employees. And you know, they were asking me like, hey, how are you doing? Are you doing all right? You don't look so good. And I was just telling them, yeah, I'm not feeling good. And they're like, yeah, I don't know, I think you might have COVID. So that's pretty much when I found out that, yeah, I might have COVID and I should go get tested. So after work, I went home, you know, asked how my wife was doing. She was, I don't remember if she was having symptoms too, but she may have been having symptoms as well. But I just said, hey, you know, let's get tested for COVID, you know. We got tested and I had COVID. So there was that. So now I'm like, wow, what do I do, you know? And I remember like everything I've read and watched basically said, you know, there wasn't really any medicine you could take for COVID or anything like that. There obviously wasn't a cure. And this is just like right when COVID started too. So it was like the strongest version of it, I guess. But anyway, yeah, I had COVID, so I had to let my job know. It's like, yeah, I won't be able to come in. I got COVID. So their protocol, you know, and I had to do this for a couple of my employees because a couple of my employees did get COVID during that time. And basically, you know, you can't come back to work. you have to be gone for at least 10 days, something like that. I forgot if we were paying or not. There was some weird thing they were doing at Walgreens where we like didn't pay the full amount for your shift or full 40 hours if you missed them for COVID, but you did get some sort of sick pay. There was something they worked out. It was weird. I forgot what it was, but anyway, you know, your instructions were basically, you know, stay home, stay inside, don't go out for, you know, 10 days or until your fever goes down. So that's where I was at, you know, and, you know, you're hearing a lot of things about COVID and how certain people, were, over it. It was like, oh, it was a few days I felt sick, and then after that, I was fine. COVID's nothing, right? So it's always like this anecdotal thing where they're like, well, I had COVID and I was fine in one day, or I had COVID and I ate a banana and in 2 hours I didn't have COVID anymore, right? So you get a lot of that, but then you get the other side where it's like, oh, this person got COVID and they died, right? Or this person got COVID and now they're in the hospital, they got long COVID, they've been in there for 30 days, they're on a ventilator, right? There's a lot of stuff going on. So at first, I wasn't like concerned that much. I was figuring, I'm fairly healthy, so it's not like I should be able to get over it pretty quick. That's what I was thinking, because I feel like, whenever I get sick, like if I get the flu or get a cold, it's usually like a couple days, and just get some rest and I'll get over it. So I figured it'll be something like that. So, a couple days go by and I'm not really getting better, just resting, right? I can't really get out of bed, and the way I'm feeling is just really, really drained, like really tired. And every time I moved, it was hard to breathe. It felt like every time I moved, so if I were just to get up, go to the bathroom, I would run out of breath. And, that was starting to get concerning because that was getting worse as the days went on. And, there came a point where I was laying on the couch, staying in the living room. I think my wife was still working. She was working at home. And I got up to use the restroom, and man, it's not like my house is huge or anything like that. I took a few steps to the bathroom and I was completely out of breath, like I just ran, like I just sprinted a lap, and I'm just like out of breath, breathing, heavy breathing, trying to get oxygen. And at that point I was just like concerned for sure. I was like, damn, this is legit, this is, as far as like if COVID was on a spectrum, right, where people are talking about they only had symptoms for a couple days and it went away, or it wasn't that bad for them, or they never had symptoms. Some people are, asymptomatic, is that what it's called, something like that, but they didn't have any symptoms. They'll have COVID, but they didn't even feel sick. And then on the other side of the spectrum, right, is the extreme is you die. But anyway, so now I'm like thinking like, okay, I'm on the spectrum, and I'm starting to go to this side of the spectrum where, I can't breathe, and, you hear talks about ventilators and all that stuff, and all those thoughts start coming in my mind. So it started getting concerning, man. And then, so what I did after that is I went and got on the phone and called a doctor, because, I had health insurance through United, and I called those telecare doctors, or I think that's what they call them. But basically you call a doctor, tell them what's going on, and then they give you like a recommendation over the phone. And, I was just telling them I couldn't breathe, told them I had COVID, and they were just saying, yeah, you need to go to the emergency room right now, right? Like with urgency, right? Like get your ass to the emergency room. And I was like, yeah, for sure, I agree. So I was like, told my wife, hey, I need to go to the emergency room. I'm really having a hard time breathing. So she takes me to the emergency room, and when we get there, I have to sit in like the waiting area or whatnot and wait for someone to come out. I let them know what's going on, and then one of the nurses basically is like, hey, can you walk from this side of the bench to the other side of the bench? So it was probably a bench with like 5 chairs or something like that. And I, took a few steps down, and then she took my oxygen, and my oxygen was really low. So it was low to the point where she was like, okay, yeah, we need to get you on oxygen right now. So they needed to connect me to the oxygen machine so they could pump oxygen. So we went into this other room, and I was thinking that well, are they gonna put me like on a hospital bed or whatnot? But yeah, they were saying because my oxygen was so low that I needed to be admitted into the hospital. I think they took x-rays too. But all right, so they said I needed to be admitted into the hospital, but they brought me into this room where I'm just like sitting in like this recliner chair. And they're telling me, you know, right now there's no available beds. So now I'm like, more thoughts are running through my mind. You know, I'm in the hospital, and granted, I never really go to the hospital. I don't even really go to the doctor, to be honest, and I know that's not good, even with healthcare. But you know, I know a lot of people like me don't go to the doctor regularly. You know, only when there's actually a problem, and I need to be better about that. But that's, you know, that's a side note. But anyway, so this is just really unfamiliar to me because of that. You know, I don't go to the doctor. I've never really been in the hospital. I've never been admitted to a hospital. But that's what happened. So I'm sitting in this chair and these thoughts are going through my head like, man, they're running out of beds. So now I'm thinking like they have a bunch of COVID patients in here, you know what I mean? And I start thinking about like the infirmary and the bodies and things you would see on TV and stuff like that. And I'm sitting here and I could barely breathe, you know, and it was crazy, man. So I'm sitting in this recliner anyway, and they're like, we got to take your blood. And of course, it takes this nurse like 10 times. She goes get another nurse to find my vein or whatever. So that was just another thing on top of everything else that was going on. I'm like, damn, man, what else can go wrong, you know? But anyway, so after that, they took my blood, they connected me to the oxygen machine, and I'm just sitting in the recliner for probably about three or 4 hours waiting for a bed, right? And once a bed becomes available, they're like, okay, we're gonna move you to a bed. We got one that's available for you. And I'm thinking like, man, you know, why did the bed become available? You know, did that person die or did that person make it out of here? You know, I couldn't help but like have like these negative thoughts, and I don't even know if they're really, I'd even consider them negative, you know what I mean? Really, it was just realistic thoughts about what was going on around the world. People were dying from COVID, and I'm in a situation where I don't really know what's gonna be the outcome, you know what I mean? And man, it was just hard, man. But then they moved me into that room, right? And so I go into this room, and what they didn't tell me is I was gonna have a roommate. So this got even more interesting. Now I'm in a room, I have a roommate, and it's this dude who's like on oxygen. He has COVID too, so he's trying to recover. He's on oxygen, but this guy is like, the nurse was telling me that he's been in there longer than he's supposed to be, right? Because you're supposed to be there, I guess it was like 10 days or something, and then they let you out of the hospital, but he kept saying that he needed to stay in the hospital. And so he was there like 5 days past however long he was supposed to be there. And it was funny, man, because like, you know, they put me in there with this guy, and then as soon as the nurse leaves, he wants to start talking to me, you know what I mean? I'm like, yo, I do not feel like talking to anybody right now. I feel like I could barely move, I could barely breathe, and this dude's like, hey man, what do you want to watch on TV? It was like, it was so weird. It was just crazy, dog. And then this dude's like, what you want to watch on TV? I'm like, hey man, I don't care, you know, I'm not feeling good. He's like, oh man, it's all good. He's like, tomorrow, man, they're gonna have burgers, you know, burgers on the menu. So tomorrow, I know, you know, my cousin works over at the my cousin works at the cafeteria, bro. I could hook you up, you know what I'm saying? To tomorrow, I'm gonna get you this. And it was just like, any other day, maybe I would have been like, oh, okay, that's cool, you know, I got the hookup in here. But I just really didn't want to have a conversation with anybody. You know, I didn't even feel like I had the energy just to hold a conversation, and that's how I felt. And so that was like it was just an annoyance, you know, because now I got like this talkative neighbor while I'm in the hospital laid up feeling sick. you know? So that was crazy, but he was in there probably, I want to say 4 or 5 days past when he was supposed to be there. And one of those days was funny. The nurse came in and she had turned his oxygen on to like a certain number, because you can, you can up the oxygen or you can lower the oxygen depending on how well you're doing. But the nurses do it, right? You don't do it yourself. But this dude, he was just like, hey, I'm about to do this myself. He went and changed the amount of oxygen he was getting. I think that was probably like the last draw, and the nurse was like, hey, you can't be touching this. You can't be changing the oxygen settings. So that was kind of funny, but it was just crazy, man. So the rest of the time, so for 3 more days, I was in that hospital, and it was a hospital right over here in Phoenix. Forget the name right now, but it'll probably come back to me. But anyway, I was in that hospital for 3 days, and yeah, man, it was just crazy, how my experience with COVID was, because actually everybody else that was at that party that had COVID didn't get it as bad as I did. None of them ended up in the hospital. So, after that, it was just like back to life, and so when I get out of the hospital, I ended up posting some stuff like on social media, Facebook, things like that, just talking about my experience and what I went through. And I put some onus on Walgreens, just because I was against like us having to come in and work the way we had to do that, because our job could have been done remotely. We're working from computers, so we could have did our job remotely, but they made us come into work. So like people were like being like, oh, we're being mandated to wear these masks and shit like that. And it's like, I was basically mandated to go into work. You know what I mean? Like a mask, if you're not going into a building or to a business, then you have the option of like not wearing a mask. But because you have the option of not having to go into that place of business or into that building, right? But with my job, because I was an essential worker, I didn't have the option of not going into work, because they didn't give that to me. And I know I complained about it, and I posted something about it on Facebook. And I remember when I went back to work, this manager, man, I was so fucking mad, bro. Excuse my language, but it pissed me off, because, I was close to death, that's how I felt, and regardless of if I didn't go to the hospital, maybe I would have still been fine or not, not being able to breathe like that and needing that oxygen made me feel like if I didn't do that, I probably would have died, so it was a crazy impact on my life. But man, I go back to work and my manager's like, let me bring you into the office. I need to talk to you, right? Doesn't ask me how I'm doing or anything like that. And again, there's no empathy, right? Because this chick, she's like anti-vax, doesn't think COVID is real, didn't think that people really got sick from it, shit like that. She would say all that shit while we were working, you know what I mean? And this was like the head manager, like on top of my manager. So she was like, I forgot her role. Anyway, she called me into the office. She's like, do you know the shit I had to go through because of what you posted on Facebook? And so I'm sitting there like, I don't care. Bitch, I almost died. You think I care? Right? So anyway, that was it for me. So as soon as that happened, I basically started looking for a new job, and I got a job working from home after that. But it's still for Walgreens, so still with the same company, and that's what I did after that. But yeah, man, I mean, other than that, it was just a really rough time, you know what I mean? And it just really sucked because all of the other stuff that was going on, as far as like with politics and the things with the vaccines, and everybody's like fighting over shit. And it's like, dude, like, it's just crazy that there's not enough empathy in the world for people to just come together and say like, hey, this is a solution that we found, you know, this is working, and everybody, you know, agree to give that a try or to go in that direction. I don't know, man. It was just crazy, and you know, but getting back to, you know, what the reason why I even wanted to tell the story is just, you know, that's the way COVID impacted my life, and I know a lot of people weren't impacted in that way, and that's why COVID wasn't a big deal to them. But for me, it was a big deal, and you know, I have a couple other stories that I'm probably going to tell. Thank you guys for listening to me, and you know, let's do better, man. Be easy.